Welcome to today's reading group. We are going to be reading a paper. So the paper itself is like a little bit more theoretical, but the authors did go on to build a system, and the system is in German. So here is the system. It's linked in the YouTube video description. I'm still waiting for that to go. There we go. Fantastic. It's linked in the video description here. So even though the points in the paper are a little bit more like in the planning stage, they did build the thing. Oh, you can't actually see that. Let me scooch this down just a tad. Whoop. So the system is called CHIM, CHIM. Question from DSI, why buttons don't display in WhatsApp? So that'll be something on the WhatsApp. The answer to that question is channel specific. It depends on the specific channel. I haven't worked with a WhatsApp integration yet, and I would check in the forums. Is that my forums button? Yeah, I would check in the forums. WhatsApp is fairly common as an integration, so I bet somebody's asked the question before. And if they haven't, you can ask. I imagine there's something you have to specify about the way they look or something on WhatsApp. That's generally the way it goes. All right. So the paper is Towards Chatbots in the Museum. Hello, Amina. Welcome, welcome. By Stefan Schaefer, Oliver Gustke? I don't know. Again, my apologies if I mispronounce anyone's name. It's never my intention to mock them. I just don't know how they're supposed to be said. Julia Meyer, and Norbert Rathinger. Probably one of those, maybe. And it's from the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence. And this paper was actually published at I think it's in the YouTube video description. So this paper was published at Mobile CHI 2018. So the paper was written a couple years ago, and like I mentioned, the system is now up. All right. In this short paper, we report on work in progress in the research project Chatbots in the Museum. This is the chatbot in the museum. CHIM develops a practicable, capable of being practiced technical solution for the use of chatbots in the museum environment. This paper outlines conceptual work conducted so far, including the comprehension of three important research topics explored in CHIM, namely information processing, multimodal intent detection, and dialogue management for museum chatbots. So I played around with this a tiny bit previously, and just I'm pretty sure that's fine. I do not speak German. And what happens is you get shown a piece of art, and then you can ask questions about that piece of art. And again, it's in German. I am not a German speaker. If any of y'all are, I would be really interested to hear your reactions to using this particular assistant. But I believe what you're going to be able to do with this assistant, again, assuming you speak German, is ask questions about the painting, things that you see, just things that might come up. The sorts of questions that you might ask, say, a docent or a museum curator if you happen to be in the gallery, you notice them there, and you're like, hey, who's this person? Or like, why is their hair like that? Or things like that, is my general understanding of what this system does. Hi, Rachel. Sorry, Robbie says hi, Rachel, and Nick says hi, Rachel, and all. Hi, Nick. Hi, Robbie. I don't know if I said hi to myself. Yeah, and I hope that answered your question, DSI. So that's what the assistant they did build does. Keywords: chatbot museum guide, personal museum assistant, and interactive user interfaces. Introduction. A chatbot is a computer program that attempts to simulate the conversation of a human being via text or voice interactions. In the museum context, chatbots offer great potential as existing pain points can be eliminated. In contrast to personal tours, takes place in an hour, is canceled today, chatbots are always available. Today's digital visitor guidance system offers only one-way communication and are not able to respond to questions from the visitor. Chatbots have the potential to respond meaningfully to the user's input if the input is processed properly. So what they're saying is chatbots make a lot of sense for visitors to a museum, and they're contrasting them to, tours with a docent, which, you may arrive at the wrong time and you may have to wait a long time, or maybe after the last one of the day, or maybe the docent's sick and can't come in today. So fewer people are going to be able to partake of this in-person tour, even if it's of a really high quality. And the other thing is that there are already existing systems that give you sort of information about pieces of art. So the ones that I'm familiar with, and I don't know how global these are like little, you rent like a little pair of headsets. That's a little bit older school. You rent like a little pair of headsets and you go around the museum and you have like a little thing and you're like, you see the symbol and it's like, this is painting one, and you press one and you hear about the painting. And these days, I think a lot of them are actually apps. So you'll download the museum app on your phone and you'll be like, oh, tell me about this painting, and you'll get like a little audio guide. But it's one way, right? You can't ask questions. You can maybe like learn more about the painting, but you're not necessarily going to be, you know, it's not interactive. So the chatbot, you get the interactivity of an in-person tour, but you get the convenience and flexibility and timing of these, what were they called? Digital visitor guidance systems. Conversations with museum visitors show that they often have specific questions about certain objects. Classical audio guides cannot answer specific questions. In the museum, a chatbot could be the expert you could take with you, answer questions, and provide further information. Figure 1 exemplifies how the conversational interaction between a visitor and the chatbot could look like. Ravi says, if all the information is from the app, going to a museum doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's a good point. So I will say that I'm a big old nerd. That's no surprise. I love museums. When I do travel, I usually try to go to museums when I do, just because I learn a lot. And again, I'm a big old nerd. And museums do offer things that, looking up the information online won't necessarily. One of those things is a lot of physical objects. You really have to be near the object and be able to like watch it or interact with it in order to understand its import. So just like a good example of that is I've been reading a lot about textiles in prehistory, and a lot of the sort of things that we know about it is because we have these limited artifacts, but the artifacts have one hypothesis about them that is created by the archaeologists to unearth them, and then additional subject matter experts can examine those objects and understand them and be like, oh, hey, I actually noticed that there's like a ridge under here that feels like it's been worn smooth by thread. So I think actually the thread, instead of going over here, goes under here, and by examining and interacting with the object, I can form that understanding. And as museum visitor, you can have that additional context, both with the objects and also with art. Physical art is very different from digital art. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but they're very different. And like installations, you can't really interact with an art installation in a digital format in the same way that you can physically. So it's just different, right? Yeah. Anyway, that's my stance there. I like museums, and it's been a very rough time for museums recently, as it has for a lot of things. So, yeah. Is it only available when I enter the museum? I mean, this one is available right now. So, is this for every museum in the world or just in Germany? So this particular chatbot, I believe, draws on particular collections. And we'll learn more about it. But my understanding, again, I skimmed the paper very briefly and tried to interact with this, but it is in German. But there are various pieces of art, and I imagine that the pieces of art have been the information and the things that users might say that has been compiled by curators and docents and people who are used to interacting with the public with these pieces of art and know sorts of questions that are going to ask. So I think that there needs to be a specialized knowledge from curators and docents, and also it's going to be very dependent on the specific collection and the specific pieces of art. and also like what's available for public viewing at any given time. Um, yeah. Yeah. Robbie says there's a lot of virtual 3D museum tours, which are great. I love them. It makes me feel like, I don't know if, again, I don't know how global this is, but when I was a kid, there was this sort of series of documentaries. Um, and at the beginning of the documentary, the intro was like you zooming through this VR sort of like constructed museum that had like an exploding volcano in it. And that's what the 3D museum tours always make me feel like I'm, in the documentary intro. Um, yeah, but it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of thinking recently about analog versus digital and the history of representing data and sort of archaeological approaches to representing other things and sort of encoding meaning. And who was it that I was talking about Wittgenstein with? I think it was Adam. I think it was the head of our research team. We were talking about Wittgenstein recently. Anyway, just set off this whole cascade of things that I was thinking about. Again, I'm a big old nerd. I would expect everybody to find that as interesting as I do. Yeah. Anyway, so let's learn more about the chatbots. Conversations with museum visitors show that they often have specific questions about certain objects. Classical audio guides could not answer specific questions. In the museum, a chatbot could be the expert you can take with you, answer questions, and provide further information. Figure 1 exemplifies how the conversational interaction, we already read that. And just as an example, again, I don't speak German, so I can't test the system, but I bet a lot of people ask what music this is on the sheet music. Like if you played it, what would it sound like? Which you could do in a chatbot, right? You could play an audio file of what that music would sound like. Yeah. Let's look at figure 1. So here's a example chatbot interaction. So someone's standing next to this this statue, and they want to know about something. Can I something about Beethoven? It's a sculpture of Beethoven. I'm getting that. And like who made it, I guess. And then they get information about the sculptor. Right. And this is the museum user, and this is the piece of art that they're interacting with. Yeah, sculpture is less good digitally. Experiencing sculpture that was originally intended to be experienced as a physical object in a digital way, I find less compelling. Sculpture that is intended to be digital in the first place is a different thing. I don't want digital artists to feel like I'm dunking on y'all. I'm not. I got nothing but respect for artists of all stripes, regardless of your medium. The aim of CHIM is to explore the usability of a chatbot in an interactive system for knowledge and learning, as well as for effective access and the comprehensible presentation of museum information. A central question is, therefore, how the existing information must be structured in order to relate to the visitor's questions. CHIM develops a new solution for providing information and explores how the latest research results in the field of intention detection, I'd probably call that intent detection, but I'm getting the impression that these folks have a deeper knowledge in museum studies and maybe like a little bit less background in dialogue systems, which is perfectly fine. Like that's the trade-off you get with a multidisciplinary anything, is that usually people have more focus in one of the disciplines than the other. And dialogue management can be utilized for chatbots in the museum context. Specifically, the following research fields for human-linked technology interaction are also to be investigated. Information processing, adaptation of the existing content creation process for classical audio and media guides to be more knowledge-based for the chatbot. So they're probably going to build some sort of knowledge base. And also, so they're having like the original information dump format, but also that interactivity format. The big contribution of this paper is that they're going to have a way of structuring that and formatting that, which I think is very relevant to a lot of folks that have general FAQ use cases. Multimodal intention detection, linguistic or text-based input processing, combined with image and other exhibition sensor, e.g. beacon processing. So to answer Ravi's question, that does sound like as you get close, like a little, maybe you boop an RFID tag, or maybe you get some sort of Bluetooth receiver that's like, hey, Moderate says, this is great. As someone getting into complang, I appreciate you breaking down some of the concrete applications. Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah. Ravi says, is it different than multimodal deep learning? Yeah. That's a good question. So I would call something. So things that I would call like multimodal deep learning would be things like image captioning and question answering together. So you have two tasks, one of which is vision based, one of which is text or speech based. And I think that they're saying here that the second mode is the sensors and also some sort of image processing. And I'm sure they'll talk about more details, but I could imagine, you know, particularly in a screen like this, I might be able to click on areas or drag across areas to select them, which I can't do that here. And be able to interact with specific parts of the piece of art and ask about specific things. So that could potentially be a use, but like imagine annotating this with questions that people have asked about like specific parts of the piece of art. I think collecting that data would be very difficult, and I think organizing it and also like latency could potentially be an issue. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you could do, but I'm not 100% sure what they're actually doing. And then dialogue management for guided tours. Intelligent dialogue strategies to determine context-relevant information and personalized information. Yeah, so this would be like, what is the person asking, and how do we determine what the correct answer is? And also, how do we take all this information that we have, so both like the audio guides we already have, and also, you know, curator-specific information. Oh no, oh dear. All right, my mic's drooping again. Is it? Beans, it happened again. Sorry, this happened last week and I thought I'd fixed it and I guess I hadn't. So I'm just really quickly gonna mute and go fix my mic so I don't have to hold it up with my hands for the next 40 minutes. Hold, please. There we go. That should be better. Oh, that's significantly better. Okay. Uh sorry, it's like bolted onto a piece of wood, and I think that as the humidity changes, this piece of wood size is changing a tiny bit. Nick says, for interacting with the bot, you can use Google Translator extension for Chrome. It'll translate from German to English. Oh, that might help. I probably should have set that up ahead of time because I don't have it installed now and it's not automatically detecting the language. Good to do in the future. All right, in this paper, conceptual work in the CHIM research fields, information processing, multimodal intent detection, and dialogue management for museum chatbots is outlined. I think specifically what they're saying is that what the location is or what the image that the person is looking at is will play a role in intent detection or classification. In the next section, related work in the chatbot relevant fields is sketched. Section 3 describes the so far developed concepts for CHIM. Section 4 describes ongoing work on use case development. Conclusion and future work are described in Section 5. Coffee. Related work. Current research in the field of interactive museum guides covers a wide range of approaches, from beacons controlling the presentation, helloguide.Germany, I think, over agent-based techniques to robotic museum guides. In the museum field, still no elaborate technologies can be found that essentially utilize conversational digital systems such as chatbots. Okay, so I'm guessing that this is like a little robot that like trundles along and you follow it. It tells you things. Agent-based techniques. No idea what that is. So that could be agent in the machine learning sense. It could be agent in the like, you know, human sense. Like it's an agent of the museum. Hard to say. In the blah, 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 chatbots. Providers such as Hello Guide so far only carry over the paradigm of entering numbers from the classical audio guide to chatbots. Okay, gotcha. So they do have like basically like an IVR system, like press 4 to learn about the sculptor or something like that. And this is, I guess this isn't current anymore, but this is something that I used a lot in my childhood. It is not possible to engage in dialogue or ask questions with such museum chatbots. Chatbot platforms such as Alexa, Dialogflow, Wit AI, or Watson enable intent detections for many domains, or Rasa, for ordering a pizza, weather report, booking a flight, shopping, etc. However, most of these platforms only offer limited customization to their domains and are limited to choice input and output modalities. So, I mean, I'm familiar with Alexa. Alexa has like a lot of built-in intents, and if you're using Alexa, you got to use the built-in intents. At least the last time I used it. And I don't think Alexa has built-in intents for like ask more about the artist, identify figure in the foreground, right? In addition, they are not able to manage a dialogue with extensive knowledge bases. Therefore, for special domains such as a tour through an exhibition, own solutions for intent detection and dialogue management have to be implemented. In many conversational systems, domain-specific knowledge is mapped by dialogue grammars and state machines. And these are some sort of older approaches. People still use them. They're still very useful. But at Rasa, we tend to combine rule-based and sort of state-based, well, not so much state machines, actually. We combine sort of memorization of dialogue patterns with more contextual understanding using TED, for example. Also, keep your eyes out for an update on that area. That's all I'll say there. We'll announce it. It will not be a surprise. Dialogue grammars and state machines provide a reliable method for intent detection and can guide the user target oriented through the dialogue, but are limited in flexibility compared to the diversity of natural language. I'm not as familiar with dialogue grammars, but state machines generally are more for deciding what to say next than they are for identifying what the person just said. Generally and historically, I'm sure you could use them for that. As a result, the intuitive operation of such systems, and thus user acceptance, may suffer. Yeah, that's a challenge of chatbots, right? People are used to having conversations, and they have strong intuitions about how conversations should go, and when those intuitions are violated, you get frustrated users. Recent successes, yes, that's the correct number of S's that I said, of statistical methods for natural language processing, NLP, and dialogue management open up new possibilities. Statistical approaches enable creating more flexible models for intent detection and dialogue management based on existing training data. Yes, this is the Rasa approach. However, a common approach is that there is little or no data for training. Hybrid methods that combine domain-specific knowledge with statistical approaches as an alternative for low-data domains are the subject of current research. And I'm pretty sure that's actually a citation to Rasa there. Let me check. Yeah, so that's so when they were talking about recent advances, they're like, that's Rasa. And it sounds like the problem that they're saying, like, okay, so we need some training data, right? We don't have a lot of training data. People haven't made a lot of conversational data sets for, there's no multi-WAS specifically for museum docents. So what do? We want to be able to combine this structured data knowledge base FAQ thing and also be able to have a conversation that's more flexible and can, meet users where they're at, basically. And I would say particularly, well, that's a good question. I was going to say particularly for museum use cases, people probably want a pretty flexible conversation, but this technology is taking over from audio guides, like the press the numbers to walk through, which they're mentioning the current systems that they are building an alternative to already do. So I think actually in this particular instance and use case, user expectations are probably pretty low. So anything that starts to feel a little bit more conversational, I think is going to be really helpful for users. And I think I don't think it's deserved, but I think there is sort of a perception that museums are, old and stodgy and not, with the times. They don't use the latest technology all the time, which again, very much not the case. But because of that perception, I think that you might have more user acceptance of a system that like works better than what was there, but is maybe not, always great and perfect. Which, to be fair, is all systems, right? Every system is going to break down sometime. All right, so they want to combine their domain-specific knowledge and knowledge bases with a more flexible machine learning system and approach. The CHIM approach. CHIM investigates hybrid methods for intent detection and dialogue management for the museum sector. A newly developed chatbot-based museum guide usually represents a new knowledge domain for which training data is not yet available. Yeah, and even if it is available, right? So even if, let's say, I have a data set of pictures of saxophones, if somebody asks a specific question about this specific picture of a saxophone, a general answer is not going to be helpful or useful, right? Like if I ask, hey, are there saxophones in this picture? And the system says yes, that's a very doable task in terms of computer vision, but that's not very like helpful or useful to someone who wants to learn more and explore a specific piece of art. And the answers that they're going to want are going to be specifically tied to a particular picture or a particular sculpture or a particular piece of art or a particular, like in a science museum, like a particular demonstration of a particular, principle from physics or whatever. So you want to be able to have an extremely grounded system, I would say. General answers are not going to be helpful here. You need a specific answer that is grounded, like literally to a specific place or a specific object, and is accurate. During the process of creating audio and multimedia guides, many data are generated, which can also be used as training data if appropriate transcription and indexing methods are applied. CHIM's approach is to combine the development of a hybrid approach for intention detection and dialogue management with the creation process of museum tours, using the data generated by authors and editors as training material for a statistical model. Okay, so then we're building a domain-specific model that, again, you got to have this grounding, you got to have this knowledge base component. I mean, you don't have to necessarily use a knowledge base to do it, but that's what I'd do. Domain-specific knowledge components, which cannot or can hardly be statistically mapped, will be realized through dialogue grammars. In addition, the consideration of further information channels, image recognition, exhibition sensor technology enables multimodal intent detection. Subsections 3.1 through 3.3 summarize the so far developed concepts for the research areas explored in CHIM. Subsection 3.4 explains the interactive realization of CHIM. Hey, Shadhaya says, how are you doing? I'm doing okay. My coffee is leaking, and I'm wondering if it's because the cup has a leak or because I have been gesturing too much, and I think it's the gesturing. Well, rip. I'll deal with that later. This is why I always keep hankies on my desk. Just do a little bit of blotting. I'm just going to finish my coffee right now so you don't have any more exciting developments. All right. There was something I was going to say, and then I got distracted, and then I got really distracted. Oh yeah, statistical mapping. Yeah, again, you want the information to be accurate. So this is, I would say this is a great place for rules, and this is a great place for like looking things up so that they are correct when you say them, because if a system built by a museum, run by a museum, says something incorrect about a piece of art, I imagine the people who are, and not necessarily just art, like artifacts or whatever, I imagine the people who work at the museum would be displeased by this outcome, and also the public would be ill-served by it. So yeah, I think accurate is going to be the most important thing here. I'm shaking a lot. Am I? Maybe. I'm definitely gesturing a lot. Information processing. In contrast to classical audio and multimedia guides, information for a chatbot system must be structured differently. The entire existing text creation process must be converted into a more knowledge-based approach. Chim needs semi-structured data to allow for flexible interaction with the content. For data preparation, approaches such as taxonomies and the use of digital asset management architectures such as Fedora Commons will be integrated into editors' workflows. I'm not familiar with Fedora Commons. I'm guessing based on the name that it's open source. Further, it will be investigated whether and how the existing data for museum guides and their contents can be prepared in such a way that they can serve as training material. So basically they're saying, hey, we're going to need to do a lot of data preparation and organization and structuring and tagging. I talk a lot. Yes. Yeah, that's the live streaming experience. I do talk a lot. Multimodal intention detection. Detecting user intent in the museum environment is a complex multimodal process. Visitors can interact with text or voice input. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, accessibility is really important. So I imagine especially for children who cannot write yet, being able to ask questions vocally will really make the systems much more available to them. On the other hand, having text available as both sort of directions of both for providing information to the system and for the system to provide information to the users is really good accessibility for people, maybe don't speak or are hard of hearing or deaf. So important to consider a range of visitor needs. Thus, on the one hand, the linguistic or text-based input of the user must be processed. I think when they say linguistic here, they mean speech. On the basis of historical data and the results of information processing, statistical and rule-based procedures will be evaluated and used. On the other hand, the consideration of further information channels, such as information processing and existing exhibition centers, e.g. beacons for localization, is of particular interest in a museum context. For this, the MMIR, Multimodal Mobile Interaction and Rendering Framework, will be used and extended. Okay, so I think this is something that's been developed previously. The framework supports the creation of multi-platform applications and enables straightforward integration of existing libraries, e.g. OpenCV for image recognition, and existing location technologies to explore the multimodal approach. Okay, so they're using an existing framework that takes in image data and applies, probably like classifying which painting it is, if I had to guess, would be the main thing that's going to do. And then also handling the sensors. Because if the museum already has sensors installed, you might as well use them. By merging the information channels, the multimodal intent detection transfers the existing information into structured data that can be further processed to enable information retrieval, the determination of the relevant data, and the provision of information, the preparation and comprehensible presentation of the information. This fusion of the individual information channels results in a multimodal intention that represents the input of the dialogue management. Okay, so basically they're describing their NLU here. And so they've got, whatever the user's providing, so whether that's speech, whether that's text. I imagine you could also still include button presses and entering numbers as the older systems were using. You've got the sensor data, where are they physically? And then you've got the image data, what are they looking at? So in this example, the image data is pretty easy to get because they know what image I am looking at in this system. And they also, have this way of providing either text data, so I can type, or I could use this to use speech recognition, so I could speak as well. So it's a combination of vision and NLP. Yeah, I would say vision, NLP, and then sensors. So really multimodal. They've got at least 3 modes. Similar. And then all of that is being used to determine the user intent. And if it were me, I'd probably structure these intents hierarchically, such that, if I were doing this in Rasa, for example, I'd probably use a response selector here. How would I do this? Yeah, I think what I would do if I were building the system is I would have a response selector. And I would have So I guess my question is, do I want to make it impossible for somebody to ask a question about the last painting they saw at the location of the new painting? And if I do, then I'd probably have a rule that would say, hey, I can only select from these intents for this location. And actually I probably wouldn't do that using a rule. I'd probably use that doing a custom action of some sort. And then when they move to the next location, I would switch it. So I would probably have some like sensor data such that when the sensor data is retrieved, that, you know, switches what the assistant can detect. And I might even, particularly if I know that I'm going to have a lot of different questions at each painting and that those questions are going to overlap a lot, I might even have a separate small assistant for each painting. So that, when I hit the sensor, boom, now I'm in a new assistant and I can ask questions to that assistant. When I hit the sensor again, boom, I'm in a new assistant. And then each assistant covers a single painting and I can do those separately. And the reason that I might do that is because I can imagine asking, like, what's the sculptor in front of a lot of different sculptures. Or the other thing that I could do is I could get really fancy at responses, right? So if, so I could do a rule that's like, hey, when this intent is detected, check what sensor we touched last. And then depending on that sensor, pick the correct response from, my custom action that picks correct responses or something like that. So a couple of ways that I might do this. Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is that they're doing. And this was written a while ago, so I don't know that they're going to also talk about that either. Dialogue management. The individual steps from intention detection over the retrieval of information to the provision of information are continuously carried out in a dialogue between the user and the chatbot. At the core of a chatbot, an intelligent dialogue management system will process the multimodal intention and determine the system reaction to offer personalized information. What about the data set? So I think the data set they created, right? And I think it's combining the information from the audio guides that already existed and also Q&As. It sounds like some sort of Q&A or some sort of structured data where, like, for each painting, you have artist specific other pieces of information people might ask, and then maybe specific Q&A pairs. I don't know, I'm guessing. The thing about, I should tell you all this, the thing about any paper that has towards in the title means that they are not done yet. If you see an academic paper with towards in the title, it means that they're working on it, and here's where they are right now, but they're not finished. But this is, as far as I can tell, this is the most recent paper published in English about this system. So they may have shared additional information since. I just couldn't find it. Blah, blah, blah. The dialogue should always be effective, intuitive, and continued with the best possible user experience. Yep. Obviously, that's a great goal for a conversational system. The input-output modalities will be adapted to the situation using text, speech, or multimedia elements. So you could show somebody the painting with like a bit circled, or I mean, even if you're in a museum gallery, you might even have like spotlights that, like, if somebody's talking to a system, it'll like spotlight a specific part of the sculpture if you wanted to be really fancy, something like that. More specifically, the information presented to the users is decided from the intention, the dialogue history, the knowledge model from the information processing, and the general context. The processing of the dialogue management will be hybrid. From historical data types of from the historical data, typical museum guide sequences are learned. At the same time, dialogue rules will be created and the two approaches combined. All right, so they've got, the information, to answer Ravi's question, they've got the information from the museum guides they used to have and also some dialogue rules. Response selector only for hi-bye conversations. I mean, you want to use a response selector where you expect conversations, where you expect something to take, ask a question, I get an answer, I go back to the flow of the conversation I was in, right? Or like I ask something, I get an answer, and I go back to the flow of the conversation I was in. So response selectors are more intended for things where you don't have like a long detour to another conversation path. It's just sort of like a quick, okay, back to what we were talking about. It's like this. Iterative realization. The realization takes place in 2 iterations using user-centered and participative design approaches. Whew. In the first iteration, the editors will prepare the knowledge for an exhibition. So this is the data curation and cleaning and management phase. At the same time, the basic CHIM functionality will be investigated with focus groups in an iterative UX process and tested in the lab with potential users. Yes, we love to see it. Getting in front of users ASAP. Fantastic. In the second iteration, the CHIM process will be implemented within further exhibition guides and evaluated with users in the context of field studies. All right, so they're doing like little mini thing for one exhibition. They're immediately getting user feedback, immediately doing UX systems studies. Love to see that. And then once that's working, it'll be expanded further. Robbie says, I don't think you can build this type of chatbot alone. You need a team. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, at the very least, like, you need someone who has deep expertise in the museum field and like knows what people are going to ask, and also somebody to, you know, build, deploy, and maintain the system. And in this case, it looks like also maybe a third person who's a UX researcher. And I would personally, like, if I were putting together the dream team for this, I'd have a product manager, or not necessarily project manager to make sure everything goes according. I'd have, you know, stakeholders from the museum, and then specifically the people who are going to be working on the data annotation and organization from the museum, probably a data scientist or maybe a DBA or somebody with like a deep knowledge of databases and data manipulation, an ML person to build the chatbot and like troubleshoot it, and then also like a DevOps person to do the deployment. One thing I know about museums is they don't tend to be rolling in money, especially right now, so I imagine their team was not that big, but they had, what, 4 or 5 people? 4 people, so yeah, definitely a team project. All right, use case development. As part of our ongoing work, we elaborate on the proposed input and output modalities of the system and exemplify the goal of our approach with respect to the user by outlining first use case ideas which are related to the multimodal interaction. As a precondition for all use cases, it can be assumed the chatbot is installed on a smartphone which has the necessary technical specifications: microphone, camera, and iBeacon, or respectively Bluetooth Low Energy. Okay, so they're using Bluetooth to figure out, you know, what physical place people are in the museum. As the main input modalities touch input on a virtual keyboard and alternatively speech input enabled by automatic speech recognition, I ruined that sentence. As the main input modalities touch input on a virtual keyboard and alternatively speech input enabled by automatic speech recognition will be utilized to interact with the chatbot. So text here, speech here, both of them get turned into text. A smartphone camera will be used for computer vision in order to recognize exhibits or other objects relevant for a specific exhibition. Okay, so you can like point your phone at the painting and be like, hey, who painted this? Or whatever it is that you want to know. Further, the proximity to exhibits will be detected by beacons and processed analog to the context. So where are you physically in the museum? Which this system doesn't have because it's the time period that it is right now. The output modalities will include visual, auditory, and tactile feedback. Okay. The visual information comprises mainly the dialogue with the chatbot and the media content like images and videos. The chatbot will make use of speech synthesis to create auditory feedback for the system prompts within the user chat dialogue. Fantastic. Again, love to see it. Great accessibility, you know, right from the start. System prompts will be generated for meta communication, i.e. system configuration, as well as for specific information coming from the knowledge model specific to the exhibition. Okay, so this is sort of behind the scenes. You're not necessarily going to see it, but your phone is communicating with the sensors. Further auditory content consists of recorded audio material, also in combination with image or video, as in a classical multimedia guide. So they're still using the stuff that they had from these audio guides previously. Tactile feedback can be used for alerts, e.g. if a user gets closer to the next exhibit of the tour. Okay, so you maybe get like a little vibration that's like, hey, FYI, you're getting to the next exhibition. Maybe check out more information here. With regard to the context of this interaction, in which this interaction will take place, a number of factors have to be considered. At the place itself, i.e. a museum or an exhibition, the acoustic characteristics can be very different, as the exhibition areas can be located in both large halls and smaller rooms. This I would not have thought about. This feels like someone with a lot of depth of experience in museum studies wrote this, but it's very true. Like if you're in a big, tiled exhibition hall where everything bounces 100 times before it gets to your ears, that's going to be a very different exhibition. Like the acoustics of that are going to be very different from like where I am right now in a small room, or maybe a historical house, particularly in so I'm from Virginia, and we have like a living history museum there called Colonial Williamsburg, where there's a bunch of like accurate reproductions of what colonial houses would look like, and the acoustic environment in an accurate reproduction of a colonial house, they're very like small and wood and like rugs and stuff, is very different than it is in, let's say, the National Portrait Gallery in Washington D.C., which is like huge marble, columns, very echoey. That was just a tangent. Further, people in the surrounding area can, on the other hand, produce noise which is harmful for ASR. And on the other hand, talking to the chatbot could distract other visitors. Within an exhibition, the auditory signals should therefore be received by the user via headphones, just to make everyone's life more pleasant. It can further be necessary to avoid the usage of speech input if other visitors are located right next to someone. The system should therefore always provide touch input on a virtual keyboard as an alternative input mode. Yeah, that's a great idea. Of course, the exception here would be someone for whom text input is not an option. To determine relevant information, not only the actual user input, but also the last user inputs, questions, or interactions should be considered to enable a personalized request. So this is basically what the TED policy does. Based on the data of this paper, they probably weren't looking into that at this point, but any sort of machine learning dialogue policy is going to consider conversation history, or it should. Based on these assumptions so far, we generated the following ideas for multimodal use cases. Okay, so this is just them sort of saying, like, here's the things that we could do. Sequential use of touch or speech with an independent fusion. Sequential use of touch or speech with independent fusion. Either touchscreen or speech input can be used to enter text-based questions about the exhibit to the chatbot. Sequential use of computer vision and textual information with combined fusion. The camera can be used to enter visual information that is recognized by means of computer vision. If an image was recognized, specific information about the corresponding exhibit can be asked. E.g., after taking a picture from a sculpture, the user can use the touchscreen and speech input to ask who made this work. And then, sequential use of textual information and exhibition sensors with combined fusion. After specific textual input via touchscreen or speech input, e.g., where does it go on, exhibition sensor processing, e.g. beacons, can be used to guide the user to the closest exhibit on the tour. Okay, so this is somebody asking like, hey, how should I move through this exhibition? Given that, I think my proposed approach where each sensor triggers like a new, no, it would still work. It would still work. Yeah. Because for each point in the exhibition, you know the intended next point in the exhibition. Yeah, this would be tricky. This would be tricky to implement. In terms of how you could add multimodal data like this to a Rasa chatbot, if you're using Diet, we read the Diet paper a while ago. Diet combines a lot of features, and what you would add is just like treating your multimodal input as another feature or like set of features added on to the end. I'd probably do it on the end of my text embeddings. And then, percolate it up through your system and come on back down. If you wanted to use those as machine learning features rather than sort of switches, and that would change the output in a rule-based way. And actually, if I was using computer vision, I would probably do something like the feature that I add would not be like the pixels, it would be like the name of the painting. I don't think I'd want to add that to Diet necessarily, though. I think I would use that to set a slot using a custom action, because I need that information to accurately answer questions. So I think I wouldn't try to do like really multimodal learning where you have the learning includes information from a bunch of different things. I think I would use the other modalities, the pictures. I mean, speech I would turn into text, and then I would use text as text. But for sensor data and for image data, I think I would add those as right. So like in my dialogue management, my dialogue policy, where I'm writing out my stories, what I would do is I would have a custom action that like when somebody's like, I'm taking a picture, I'd write it so that that triggered a slot to be set, and the slot was set based on the picture, the image that was realized, and then I would add that sort of rule, check the slot, and then use that to look up something in the knowledge base based on the specific question the user is asking. And I think the more I think about it, the more I think I probably would use slots. So I'd probably have like a slot for location in the gallery. I'd probably have a slot for like current piece of artwork that the person is talking about. And yeah, how those slots would be set would not be through text. It would be through multimodal ways by default. But then if people wanted to change, they could change it by text. So if like I'm like, oh, painting name was painted by painter name, and they're like, no, I'm asking about the painting, other painting name, or oh no, I'm asking about this one, taking a picture of a different painting. For that, yeah, for that I think I would keep a single system and then have the ability to change the slots throughout. That's how I build this. Just sort of like spitballing it and sort of thinking about the particular approach that I would take. Yeah, and for latency reasons, I might even do, yeah, I'd probably offload the CV through an API call, so we're not doing it on device, because that could be pretty time intensive. I am not deep in the computer vision literature, I will say, but I would probably send that off to be handled elsewhere and not do that on device. Yeah, you grew up in Virginia. I did. Did you ever make a digit recognizer classify? Ah, the old MNIST starter thing. I feel like I have at some point. I don't remember it very well. I'm gonna be honest, computer vision is just not something that interests me. Um, yeah, I appreciate that there are some good applications. I think there's also lots of really bad applications that keep me up at night and make me worried. And I given that I have a lot of biases and that I have a lot of deep knowledge in one of these areas but not the other, my understanding of the relative difficulty of the problems is that language data and the questions that we are asking about language data and the tasks that we're trying to do are more difficult than some of the more commonly asked computer vision questions. Yeah, I just think it's more interesting. Enrique says, I guess QR code should be enough to detect location orientation, not getting right this beacon's point. Oh, so I think the reason they're using beacons is because they already have them. Because they were mentioning that the systems that are being used, that are currently in use when this was written, already use these beacons. So they are building on top of the existing infrastructure, which I don't know. It's I'm trying to remember the quote. It's something like no plan survives contact with existing systems or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote. But particularly for something like this, where you have existing infrastructure and existing systems that kind of do what you want to do, but not exactly. So you're building something else that will replace these existing systems. You don't get a blank slate, right? You have a slate that already has some stuff written on it, and you have to like take that into consideration. And if if the library or the museum has already spent, a couple $100,000 installing all these beacons, you should use the beacons. Also probably faster than QR codes. Because you can, like, as soon as you wander into range, the Bluetooth can be like, oh, we're in a different place now. Flip side of that, potentially battery usage on people's devices. So, I'm still learning, but in the future, I'll do amazing projects. Yeah, I have no doubt of that. All right. Conclusions and future work. The development of a practical technical solution for the use of chatbots in the museum environment represents a challenging task. I would agree. And I would say the bulk of the work will be building the knowledge base. like 90% of the work, being my guess, even though they have the audio guides, like transforming that into a conversational stance and figuring out like what questions are people going to ask about specific pieces of art and how can you direct people to more information, and you know, the vast majority of the work will be that, and adding new pieces of art, right? Because most museums, at least, again, I don't know how global this is, but certainly in the US, most museums have enormous collections and you see part of it, right? So when a new exhibition comes along and you've got, you know, 100 pieces of, let's say, you know, um, early American quilts, right? You're gonna have to write your knowledge base for each of those quilts so that people can ask questions about them. And if you don't know any quilters, they are gonna ask a lot of questions. So there'll probably be a lot of interest in those objects and specific questions, and people are gonna know about like the stitching patterns or like the where the fabric came from or whatever, or like the type of dyes used. So there's gonna be like a lot of questions that you're gonna have to build, especially for each piece in each exhibition, depending on the intended audience, depending on like the questions that people are going to ask. Knowing what those questions are going to be is like a huge, you know, huge piece of specialized knowledge that curators and docents will be able to provide. So the information management part of this equation, I would say, is 90% of it, just based on my professional experience. It's got that feeling. The editing process for the audio and media guides is a highly specialized process. And the extension of knowledge-based approaches for the realization of a chatbot for museums has to be carried out. Yeah. And in this one, I don't think you can see, but they say that there are 15 pieces of art in here. And you can sort of, oh, no, that's not what that means at all. Well, I thought that was going to be pieces of art, but when I move through the pieces of art, that doesn't change, so who knows? I'm gonna stay here, look at this dog. Looks a little bit like my dog. Something dog in snow, maybe? I don't know, I do not speak German. Yeah. The interplay of existing approaches for intention, detection, and dialogue management opens up a number of research questions, including how chatbots can be used in complex environments such as museums. A solution for hybrid knowledge processing and the technical information processing, multimodal intent detection, and dialogue management for museum chatbots will be explored in CHIM, which again, system is up, so you can play with it. Different multimodal use cases will be studied. The success of the project will be assessed by a demonstrator implemented iteratively in 2 development phases. So the first one, single exhibition, lots of UX input. The second one, expanding it to other exhibitions. To ensure the acceptance of CHIM, the overall system will be designed, developed, analyzed, and optimized in cooperation with museums and visitors. Yes, love to see it. Focus groups and field studies in various museums will be conducted. I'm guessing that maybe the field studies are like on hold for now, but again, it is available. And also, speaking of multimodal things, like being able to show the painting along with the chatbot, particularly for right now and going to museums in person isn't really a thing. This is fabulous, right? This is great access to this art. And if I spoke German, I could learn about it. But I don't. Yeah. Enrique says, Alexa just reads Wikipedia if you ask for a picture. I don't know. I don't actually use Alexa. But yeah, it's a good question. And it's a lot of the sort of the virtual assistants that live in homes are often not designed to handle long multi-turn conversations, and that's just like not part of their main use case. And I couldn't find it the last time that I was looking for it, but the majority of uses of these systems are like to set alarms, to play music, to set reminders, so things that are one-turn conversations and don't really continue over time. And there are things like trivia games or like reading through a recipe and getting the next step that would be multi-turn conversations. But also, particularly for smart speakers, you want them to turn off, and you want them to turn off like the microphone. You want them to turn off like with fairly high consistently pretty quickly, just for privacy reasons. So it's really annoying to have a multi-turn conversation where you need to wake your assistant up every turn, which could also be part of it. But yeah, I would say that these sort of multi-turn uh, interactive question answering systems are not I wouldn't consider them to be in the same sort of realm of applications as a smart home assistant, at least personally. Yeah. All right, so that's the paper, and we are right at 10. Wow, I nailed it. Good job, Rachel. Um, yeah, really interesting. I'm happy to see that it got built. If anyone who speaks German wants to let me know how good it is, I'd be really interested to hear. I will say I am enjoying just like flipping through and looking at all these pictures. Um, yeah, and it's a really like interesting selection as well. A little Monet, lots of lots of different time periods and locations. All right. So thank you so much for joining today. I hope this was interesting. I really enjoyed it. I really like thinking about different applications of chatbots and conversational systems and where they work and where they won't work and sort of what would I do. And I don't know. And I know y'all are working on so many different types of projects that I don't know, just gets me excited and thinking uh, about systems, which I enjoy. All right. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope is today Thursday. Yeah, I hope those of you who caught the webinar had a good time. If you missed it, it's the Beyond the Release Notes webinar, and it will be up on our YouTube channel, so you can watch that and get all the latest scoops on stuff coming out on Rasa. And then we'll be back tomorrow with live coding. We're going to continue working with Docker Compose. I'm really thinking of switching to Helm from Docker Compose just because I have more experience with Helm, and yeah, so this may be the last one where we work with Docker Compose, trying to get our database up. I'm gonna be honest, if we don't do it, I'm gonna switch back to Helm, and I'm gonna redeploy my my Rasa X instance, which should be fine. Oh no! Rayla and Bolshevik Power just missed it. I'm so sorry. Um, yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. So tomorrow, live coding, and that's going to start at 9 a.m. Pacific, which is an hour before this time, but tomorrow. And then next Wednesday, there won't be any office hours. I'm out of office, but next Thursday, we will have another reading group. And I haven't really decided what we're going to do for next reading group. This will be on YouTube. Yes, this is on the Rasa YouTube channel. It should be available immediately. And yes, we do the reading group every Thursday where we read a paper. This week we were reading about chatbots in the museum. Friday is live coding, and then Wednesday is usually office hours with one of my teammates where we just answer questions. But next weekend, no office hours, yes reading group, yes live coding, and I will see you tomorrow. All right, thanks so much for joining, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will